Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching NDTV. In a major revelation by the Indian Armed Forces, Pakistan used civilian aircraft as a shield against Indian air defense systems and kept its airspace opened, even attacking India on the 8th of May. Now, of course, those attacks have been neutralized, but what we understand is that Pakistan did not close its airspace yesterday. It allowed civilian aircraft to operate while it sneakily launched Turkish-made drones at Indian cities on Thursday. This is what the government said in a briefing today evening. Now, Pakistan used unsuspecting civilian aircraft flying in its airspace as shields. That's what the government has said. This is a big revelation, and it's a new low for Pakistan, the weaponizing of airspace that was meant for civilian aircraft. Now, the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security has also implemented stronger security checks at Indian airports across the country. This is even as tensions soar between India and Pakistan. And these measures include secondary security checks at boarding gates and also a ban on visitors inside terminal buildings. But when it comes to airspace, specifically at a time of conflict, who governs its use or misuse? What do international laws and agreements say when it comes to military convention on civil aviation from airspace to airports? That is what we will try and focus on today. But before that, let me also give you a glimpse of what happened at the briefing today.
Pakistan did not close its civil airspace despite it launching a failed unprovoked drone and missile attack on 7th May at 8:30 hours in the evening. Pakistan is using civil airliners as a shield, knowing fully well that its attack on India would elicit a swift air defense response. This is not safe for the unsuspecting civil airliners, including the international flights which were flying near IB between India and Pakistan. During a high air defense alert situation in the Punjab sector, as you have seen, the airspace on the Indian side is absolutely devoid of civil air traffic due to our declared closure. However, there are civil airlines flying the air route between Karachi and Lahore. Indian Air Force demonstrated considerable restraint in its response, thus ensuring safety of international civil carriers. With an intent to target military infrastructure, Pakistan military also resorted to firing of heavy caliber weapons along the line of control. Along the international border and line of control, drone intrusions were attempted from Leh to Sar Creek at 36 locations with approximately 300 to 400 drones. Indian Armed Forces brought down a number of these drones using kinetic and non-kinetic means. The possible purpose of these large-scale aerial intrusions were to test the AD systems and gather intelligence. Forensic examination of the drone debris is being undertaken. Preliminary reports suggest them to be of Aziz Guard Songa drone of Turkey.
The Gurdwara in Poonch in particular was attacked by Pakistan, and some local members of the Sikh community, including the Ragi of the Gurdwara, lost their lives in this incident. Pakistani claims that they did not target or attack any religious place. Instead of owning up to these attacks, Pakistan made the preposterous and outrageous claim that it was the Indian Armed Forces and the Indian Air Force that was targeting cities like Amritsar and trying to put the blame on Pakistan.
Okay, my colleague Shiv joins us now. Shiv, quoting directly from the briefing that happened today, Pakistan's irresponsible behavior was seen when it did not close its airspace. Pakistan is using civilian aircraft as a shield against Indian air defense systems. Civil aircraft was seen flying between Karachi and Lahore. What does this revelation mean for India and the case that it has rightly built against Pakistan?
Vasudha, Pakistan has always been accused at the army level of situating its artillery guns and Pakistan army posts inside civilian villages on their side of the line of control in order to restrict the Indian army from firing back, because the Indian army has morals and does not fire on civilian establishments, and therefore, civilian villages are used as a human shield. Take that analogy into the air now, and what the Pakistan Air Force has basically done, as is being said by the Indian government today in that briefing, is that they've launched a swarm of drones at India without shutting their airspace, which basically means should India react to those drones and fire surface-to-air missiles or air defense systems, then any civil airliners flying in Pakistani airspace stand endangered and at risk of being shot down by those Indian missiles. In other words, Pakistan doesn't care about the safety of airliners in its airspace. It would rather put them at the risk of being shot down by an Indian missile just to prove some kind of circular point about India. That alone tells you what Pakistan's integrity and morality is really about. It basically takes the entire concept of a human shield, which only terror groups are accused of doing, the Pakistan army has been accused of doing in the past, and taking it into the air at a much higher level. This has international implications because remember, India is a member of international civil aviation bodies, Vasudha, and this means that with India making a formal allegation of this kind against Pakistan, alleging that it has refused to close its airspace when that would have been the technically obvious thing to do when it is launching an aerial attempt to attack Indian establishments, not closing its airspace has put international airliners at risk. So I'm very curious to see how civil aviation bodies in other countries, airlines that use Pakistani airspace and airports will react, because with India saying it, with the weight that India carries, how can anyone ignore it is my question.
Absolutely, Shiv. Also because you're in Jammu and Kashmir, there was another point that Vikram Misri, the Foreign Secretary, made today, and that was about the heavy shelling that we witnessed by Pakistan in Jammu Kashmir's district, specifically Poonch. He talked about how this hit the house of 2 students of a convent school, killing them. You also went to Uri, which also saw deaths of civilians. Tell us, what are people feeling about this?
There's a huge amount of anger because virtually every part of Uri and Kupwara and the forward areas, has been evacuated because of multiple, casualties in those areas. There have been deaths in the Tangdhar area of North Kashmir. We couldn't get till there because it's completely out of bounds. I just returned from the home in Uri today of the first fatal casualty, a woman called Nargis Bano, her grieving family. We met them and we reported on their grief today. But a very important piece of information that the Foreign Secretary gave out in his briefing today, Vasudha, was that in the shelling and the crossfire that has happened, there have been some Indian Army casualties as well in Poonch. He did not specify a number, and a certain number have also been injured. He also did confirm a story that we've been breaking here on NDTV at least 5 days ago, which 3 days ago when Operation Sindoor actually started, which is that the Indian Army has wreaked havoc on the Pakistan side of the line of control, on Pakistan Army posts, inflicting a huge amount of casualties and damage on their side. He did refer to that for the first time. So we basically have a confirmation that a lot of damage has been inflicted on the Pakistan side of the LOC in Poonch Rajouri, while also acknowledging that India has suffered losses in some of those Pakistan Army posts. We're trying to get a number. It should be coming out very soon. But things are not looking good. It's been a 3rd night running since Operation Sindoor of ceasefire violations on the line of control.
Right. Thank you, Shiv Arur, for joining us with those details. We'll keep coming back to you for more details. Also, joining us now is Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, and he is a defense expert. We also have Colonel Rajiv Agarwal joining us. He's a senior consultant, Chintan Research Foundation. We have Captain Yashika Tyagi. She is an ex-Indian Army officer. Ambassador Yash Sinha, former diplomat. We have Rajat Sethi, political analyst, and we have Sanjay Lazar, who's an aviation expert. Thank you all of you for joining me on this broadcast. To you, Mr. Lazar, first, because we're talking aviation. Commercial aviation is an exemplar of safety. We all take flights quite often. Military action against civilian aircraft is relatively rare. But the consequences are often significant. I was reading up on this and I saw that Ukraine also shut its airspace when the war was on. But are there any international rules that govern the use or misuse of airspace, especially during conflicts?
Thank you for having me, Vasudha, on your show. First of all, it's shocking to have seen the press conference from Foreign Secretary who pointed out that Pakistan had used this airspace and civilian airspace. The rules of the air are very clear, and they go back to 1919, actually prior to the World War I, when international law was made, codifying military airspace as well as civilian airspace. And that's what we've seen a violation of. Article 12 is very clear, and it lays out that military airspace will be different from the civilian airspace, which are controlled by air traffic controllers. During a wartime, we have what is known as a MARSA. Military assumes responsibility of separation of aircraft. You also have what is air defense identification zones. Now, civilian aircraft should not be flying in this. Now, if India had evacuated its airspace or Pakistani airspace, Pakistan kept it open and allowed civilian aircraft to come within, and they were firing off drones under the disguise of the civilian aircraft, knowing fully well that India could not respond or would not respond. And this is, this goes below any defense force. I mean, we've got so many defense experts on the show with us today, and they will tell you this is just not a done thing, either in land warfare or air warfare or naval warfare. There are rules of engagement, and this clearly violates them. We have a history of over 30 incidents in world aviation where militaries have struck out, or air forces have struck out at civilian airliners. Some of the more famous ones are the Korean Air 007 in 1983, the Iran Air in 1988 by the US Navy. These are aircrafts that went into areas of conflict. And there is no mercy, in a war, unfortunately. Right. So Pakistan has been very underhanded, and, it's absolutely unacceptable that they would do such a thing. I believe the Foreign Secretary pointed out that we had a FlyNAS 320 that was flying out of the airport there, and that's a civilian aircraft going to the Middle East. And it's unthinkable that Pakistan would launch an attack on India whilst this was going on. It's beats me. I mean, I've never heard something, and I heard Shiv saying this earlier, and he's absolutely right. It's a breach of international law and of military law.
Right. Let me get in other experts also. Captain Tyagi, Yashika Tyagi, how do you see this violation by Pakistan, this breach of international law? Like Mr. Lazar was also saying that the law is very clear on this, that military airspace is different from civilian airspace. The revelation that's been made by armed forces today, how do you see this, ma'am?
Jai Hind. And today being here on this panel is actually a fan moment. I have been reading about General Kulkarni's op Meghdoot all along. And sir, salute to you. Great to be here sharing this panel with you. Truly an honor. Now about your question that what do I feel about Pakistanis violating this basic paradigm? Well, what else do you expect from a Pakistani? I think down in the dumps, their morals, their morale is both down into the heels of their boots. I have nothing more to say in this than express deep shame. Retaliation with those 500 drones today were on expected lines. Absolutely. And how their HQ-9s failed to perform again on expected lines, and how our S-400 rocked is again on expected lines. And today, I am very glad to say that this one saying that says man behind the machine is one who turns the tide. And today, let us take it one more step further and say man/woman behind the machine. Gives us great pleasure. We all have been watching this briefing given by Colonel Sophia and Wing Commander Vyomika. And let me tell you with great pride as a woman officer, I say that these two women who are there representing these two services, they are representing, but at every stage of this operation, may it be the use of Rafales or the drones or land or the warships getting readied, whatever you may say, everywhere women officers' footprint is there.
Right.
So it is an extremely proud moment, and I think after this operation Sindoor is over, we will be doing our analysis about the takeaways from it. And one takeaway that will stand out is how women officers are so ready for the combat. If this is not combat, what is?
Absolutely.
And women officers are there right at the helm of it.
That's a very, very good point. Yeah. Lieutenant General...
I myself have been part of Kargil, Battle of Kargil. And so a lot of years have passed, and from where to where we have come.
Absolutely.
Very proud moment.
That's a huge milestone. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, sir, how do you see the escalation that Pakistan has initiated now? Because we all stand by what Vikram Misri said yesterday, that Pahalgam was the original act of escalation and India is just responding to that. But 36 locations from Leh to Sar Creek in Kutch, clearly was this expected? Did you expect Pakistan to react like this? Of course, fortunately, all of that has been neutralized, but what can India expect next?
Thank you very much. At the outset, yes, go along with Yashika. We are really proud of our women officers, goes without saying. Now, coming to your question, surely, at least I never expected Pakistan would do that. For a very simple reason. I thought there was some backdoor or some rumors or maybe false information that the NSA had spoken. There was someone from Saudi Arabia had come to India, the minister wanting to, negotiate or facilitate better relations between the two countries. And just the night previous, they had fired all their missiles and drones, and all of them had been neutralized even before they could enter the Indian airspace. But, well, knowing Pakistan and knowing what it did, and again, that what you said rightly, using human shields and all kinds of things, this is what Pakistan is all about. A rogue state you cannot trust. It would do exactly what you think they would not do, they will do it. Right. And that is the reason why. But notwithstanding all that, obviously, the armed forces were prepared. Armed forces knew. And that is what come as a surprise to the Pakistanis. They thought they could surprise us, and instead they got surprised. Because they realized that all the drones, all the missiles were virtually neutralized, and they had suffered heavy losses.
Right.
And you rightly said, from Leh to Sar Creek, 36 locations, over 300 to 400 of the missiles and drones, damage virtually nil, except for the, the firing along the LOC, where, of course, from the small arms, they graduated to heavy artillery fire, which led to some, locals, both women and children, die along. And again, a communal tinge given to that firing, where you had the Gurudwara being targeted, you had the Christian convents targeted. So that's indicative, and of course, the other Hindu homes targeted. That's an indication what Pakistan is all about. Deceit, absolute deceit. A nation you cannot trust, and therefore we ought to be vigilant, irrespective of whatever it be. They couldn't have been trusted. They were never ever trusted from 1947 till date. They proved that they are a rogue state which uses terrorism as an instrument of state policy. Yeah.
Okay. Before I go to others, Rajat, then how do you even deal with a neighbor like this? Because, this is clearly a country that is not playing by the book. They have violated the rules, international laws on the use of civilian airspace. They have used citizens, unsuspecting citizens as shields to fight their own battle and to, fight this battle of vengeance and terrorism. How do you even react with a state like this? What can India do in this case? Because clearly, this is a country that's not playing by the rule book here.
Good evening, Vasudha. On your show today, I'm wearing the hat of a defense tech entrepreneur and not as a political commentator. We make sensors for our Indian Defense Forces. Therefore, I have some understanding of the sinister design with which they would have left their airspace for civilian operations open. And I am not surprised with this. They have perhaps drawn from their partners in Iran, who, if you remember, in January 2020, Iran had initiated certain missile strikes on the US after General Qasim Soleimani was shot down by US and killed by US. And as a result of opening the civilian airspace, it resulted in a fatality and shooting down of a Ukrainian civilian airlines where 176 civilians lost lives. So clearly, you're dealing with a state where military jihad complex works together. They are used to putting civilians in the harm's way. Their end game is not protecting their civilians. You fight a war to defend and protect the right of every single citizen, but that's not how they are wired. So you are dealing with a beast which will not play with any rules of international law during the wartime. You're dealing with a rogue state which has no bottom limits. They can cross all kinds of Rubicon. And this is the reason why a mature country like India has to be cautious. And I think if they're calling out this bluff of Pakistan in public sphere, now the onus has shifted on to Pakistan.
Right.
If tomorrow any civilian fatalities happen and a civilian aircraft comes into the line of fire against our AD systems, it is Pakistan which should be accountable for it. And I think this press conference has made it amply clear before the international audience that the responsibility is with the rogue state.
Right. That's very well said. Colonel Agarwal, help us understand some basic, responses that people are looking at. What can we expect next? Because what we saw yesterday was quite terrifying. But what does this escalating India-Pakistan tension mean for normal people, for common citizens of the country? And what can India expect next? What happened yesterday, does that mean that we need to prepare for an all-out war, or this escalation is still something that is manageable?
So, Vasudha, we are still at a very low end of the spectrum as far as the escalatory ladder is concerned. Till now, when we targeted the 9 locations and the 21 targets, they were all terror infrastructure. So, we kept the conflict or the attack restricted to terror, and that was made very clear by the Foreign Secretary that it is non-escalatory and we have targeted only the terror. What Pakistan has done, although they are claiming that they targeted military infrastructure, but from the debris and the pieces that have been found today after the drones were shot down, it is very clear that many of the targets were civilian targets, and some were military targets. Right from the northernmost part, from Siachen base up to the Kutch, they have targeted so many locations. And this is an escalation because moment you target civilian and military targets, you are moving up the ladder.
Right.
And this is a provocation because Pakistan is very clear from day one that it is provoking India to join this conflict at the highest spectrum of war. Now, what India will do in response to this, we have stuck to what we have been doing, that we will only strike military targets that we have done, and now we have to see how it goes further. But we have to be prepared for the worst, and in this context, I would say that the civil defense drills that have been initiated today, also we had the first air raid sirens being practiced in Delhi.
Right.
They are very essential, not only from the physical point of view, but from the psychological conditioning of our citizens that you are also part of the conflict which is going to happen, because this time the conflict may not be restricted to the border or the line of control.
Absolutely. Ambassador Sinha, thank you so much for waiting so patiently, sir. Pakistan, we know that has launched several Turkish-made drones, is what I think Colonel Sofia Qureshi also talked about today. But India's air defense network jammed several of them, shot others down. How do you see the kind of support that Pakistan gets from China, or even the friendliness of Turkey? And also, on the other hand, you also had Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia and also Iran come to India. So clearly, both countries are using their diplomatic avenues there, India more so. How do you see this, sir?
As far as Pakistan is concerned, the support that it gets in the international community right now, basically China, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and of all the countries, Somalia. But there are other countries too who may be sympathetic, but obviously find this whole Pahalgam terrorist attack repugnant, as any civilized person would. But apart from the international support, I think having dealt with Pakistan for over 10 years of my 37 years in the Foreign Service, I'm aware of Pak perfidy. But this is plumbed new lows, I really think, because not only did they sort of term the Pahalgam the heinous terrorist attack as a false flag operation, now they are using civilian aircraft as cover to launch attacks on India. And then they target places of worship like Gurdwara, temples, churches, etc., and then blame the Indian armed forces for launching the attack. I mean, it is incredulous how much they can lie, fabricate, but that is the nature of the Pakistani state, and we must realize that. I think in India we still have some very fancy notions about Aman Ki Asha, etc., with these people, with the state at least, with the government. I think we must know that Pakistan really looks at us as an eternal enemy. And I've been saying it in other channels too. I think I would just make 3 quick points. One, we should go to, I'm sure the ICAO will take note of this. I do hope that there is some remedial measure for what Pakistan has done in terms of hiding behind civilian aircraft. Two, I think at the very minimum, when this whole crisis is over, Pakistan should be compelled to sign a no first use, because all the nuclear saber rattling has the world on edge. So they should be compelled to either their nuclear weapons should be sequestered, or they be compelled to sign a no first use. Third, I think, and that's something that should happen because the whole world is seeing what Pakistan is all about. As a state sponsor of terrorism, Pakistan must be declared a a state sponsor of terrorism, and with all its implications. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sinha. Coming back to Sanjay Lazard, I understood the points that you made, but when you navigate the skies in a time like this during conflict, is there any possibility of arbitration specifically when it comes to violations like this? Now that Pakistan has violated something like this, putting so many civilians at risk, which international court is going to take this seriously, or for that matter, how does how does diplomacy or international diplomacy look at a violation like this? Mr. Lazar, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, the ambassador is very correct, Vasudha. We have to take this up with ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. There is a Hague conference. The Hague Treaty provides for, like I said, separate parts, MARSA, and ADIS, what is known as Aviation Direction Zones, which are separate. And violations of these are tackled within the convention itself. So I do believe that the Indian diplomats will move both Pakistan as well as the ICAO, because technically, whilst we're not in a state of war, we are already at a conflict stage, which is still a very low stage. But civil aviation is something that is not meant to be toyed around with. We have seen so many incidences. The last one was in November or December of last year, where we saw Russia shooting down over Ukraine an aircraft that came down. And this is something that the international civil aviation will frown upon, nations will frown upon, and I think India will take it up pretty strongly to see that Pakistan has used aircraft and humans as a human shield to cast its bombs on India. There is ample scope, and I think India should act within the realm of the appropriate treaties and the conventions.
Right. Ambassador Sinha, before you go, I just wanted to ask you, there is a lot that we talk about Pakistan being a failed state, the fact that its economy is not doing well. Then how can it afford something like this given its extent of external debt, or for that matter, limited foreign exchange reserves? How is the country even prepared for something like this, or is it just posturing and projection?
Vasudha, for the last 35 years or more, I have maintained that Pakistan is the sick man of Asia, surviving on a drip of international aid. And that international aid comes from the multilateral institutions like the IMF, World Bank, or bilaterally earlier from countries like the United States, and more recently from China and the Gulf. But as long as these countries, and there is a reason for it, because it's a nuclear weapon state, and countries are scared to contemplate the implosion of a nuclear weapon state. So what they do is continue to give assistance, even if it has very low levels, to keep it afloat. And what does Pakistan do? The assistance that they get, they use to either buy arms or to sponsor terrorism. So that is why I think our outreach to the IMF is particularly pertinent in these circumstances, because the money that flows into Pakistan, instead of going to the common people, helping them, ameliorating poverty, being used for economic growth, is being used to purchase weapons and to pay jihadis to create mayhem in India.
Right. Rajat Sethi, very quickly, everyone is talking about conventional deterrence, pointing out to the fact that if you break down terrorist infrastructure, they come up in a year or two. In those circumstances, is economic instruments such as trade or sanction the only way to ensure that the country falls in line?
I think so. If countries like China and the United States get together and decide to hold Pakistan's feet to the fire, I'm sure there will be a change in behavior.
Okay.
Because they are the patrons. I mean, they're the people who sort of encouraged, or at least not encouraged, but the reason why Pakistan behaves the way they behave.
Right. Rajat Sethi, would you like to come in here? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, if you look at Pakistan and look at the numbers, they're growing at merely 1.5%. Their inflation is 30%. Their currency, I believe, has depreciated by around 20-25% in 1 year. They barely have any foreign exchange left, and this is why they are before the IMF. The external debt is 130 billion when their reserves are almost zero. So you can imagine this is a bankrupt state. It is surviving. This, in ideal scenario, would have broken up into multiple pieces. It is just that there are certain actors, certain players like China and all, just trying to withhold them, tie this shredded country economically in one piece together. And I think that glue that is there is this aspiration that one day they'll be able to overcome this current condition. But their fundamentals, their economic fundamentals, do not indicate anything of that sort. Right. It is just surviving through that drip of economic support, I agree, and also as a test bed to future military drills, perhaps. I mean, China is happy if Pakis are getting and experimenting with their weapon and understanding how far their weapon can succeed in a real battlefield. I think this is just being used as a test.
Practical way of looking at things. Last word, Colonel Agarwal.
This is like a lab rat.
How can also India sustain a policy of calibrated pressure without slipping into what we can call a reactive posturing, which I'm sure India will not do, but there's also pressure, and if Pakistan keeps retaliating like this, how does India ensure that it maintains its calibrated posturing and also ensures that its diplomatic offensive is on point?
So, why have we reached Pahalgam this stage? It is only because we have been guilty of not acting when we should have acted. Did we act on a parliament attack on December 2001? We did not. Did we take any kinetic action when Mumbai took place? We did not. Even at Uri, Pathankot and Pulwama, we had solitary surgical strikes going in. That's the end of it. Terror cannot be eliminated by one solitary strike. You have to keep the pressure on. And across the LC, at any point of time, the armed forces and the intelligence agencies have inputs of how many terrorist launch pads are there, how many terrorists are there, how many training camps are there. But we monitor them. We don't take them out. We have to adopt a policy that if the head of the snake is raised, it has to be taken down. That sustained pressure, along with economic and diplomatic efforts, is the only way that you can take this menace out.
Right. Thank you all of you for joining me on this broadcast. In a special briefing in New Delhi today, armed forces have said that Pakistani army violated Indian airspace several times over the entire western border with the intention of targeting military infrastructure. In fact, it was also said that Pakistan fired heavy caliber weapons along the line of control. And while this is happening, while tensions are soaring, it's important to see how India responds, how it tailors its diplomatic messaging to maintain international support while executing unilateral strategic decisions. With that, it's time for a short break. For news and updates on the other side.